In 1980, animal rights activists Ingrid Newkirk and Alex Pacheco joined forces in order to bring their view that discriminating against any life form on the basis of their species was no different than discriminating based on someone's race, gender, or sexual orientation. The group they created was called People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA for short. Their mission statement can be found on their slogan, which they still have 44 years later. Animals are not ours to eat, wear, experiment on, use for entertainment, or abuse in any other way. Over time, the organization grew to incredible heights, gaining international attention for their elaborate stunts to bring awareness to their cause. But while they have certainly proven themselves to be successful at getting people to talk about their core belief, many argue that the discussion surrounding PETA does far more harm for their cause than good. This is largely due to the fact that over the group's long lifespan, they have effectively become the laughingstock of the animal rights world. Today we will extensively cover every single controversy they've been in, to see just how their reputation reached this point. PETA first made news during the Silver Spring monkey case. Newkirk leafed through the US Department of Agriculture's list of laboratories and picked the one closest to her as the site of their first undercover investigation, the Institute for Behavioral Research. The plan was straightforward. Pacheco volunteered at the IBR, which was run out of a warehouse by behavioral neuroscientist Edward Taub. On his first day on the job, he quickly discovered the horrific reality that was being concealed behind inconspicuous walls. The original thing he noticed was the unmistakable stench of bodily fluids. He next discovered the 17 macaque monkeys being kept in cages, 9 of which had their spinal nerves severed so that one or more of their limbs would be made useless through a process called deafferentation. This surgical crippling was ostensibly done by Taub to test the scope to which voluntary movement is possible in the absence of feeling, hoping to use his derived conclusions to help recovering stroke victims. Through the use of electrocution, food deprivation, and other methods, he forced the little monkeys to try and move their unfeeling limbs. In one particularly crude test, the primates were strapped to a restraint chair with their waist, ankles, wrists, and neck held in place with duct tape, and pliers clamped down on their genitals. Every night, Pacheco would come into the lab after hours to snap photographs of the horrifying conditions on display, take meticulous notes detailing the processes the monkeys were suffering through, and even brought in and out other scientists to show them around the lab so they could testify to what was going on in the interest of building the most rock-solid of cases. During these late-night heists, Newkirk was parked outside clutching one of the 2 walkie-talkies they had bought from a nearby toy store, ready to notify him if any of the lab workers happened to return. After gathering all they needed, they presented their findings to Montgomery County Lieutenant Richard Swain. This kind of case was unprecedented at the time, but after some logistics were ironed out, like Humane Society employee Lori Connealy offering to house the monkeys in her basement, Swain finally procured a warrant and led the authorities in a full search of the lab. The raid did not go entirely smoothly, as PETA betrayed the trust of Lieutenant Swain by alerting the press to what was going on. Before the cops were able to step foot in the lab, there were several journalists and at least one TV camera crew in the parking lot. PETA activists distributed press releases and photos of the suffering macaques, turning what should have been a covert affair into a publicity event for their organization. In spite of this being added into the mix, 17 monkeys were rescued from the lab that day. This raid was not the end of the story, but rather the beginning of the real battle. The monkeys were taken to Lori's basement, where they watched soap operas on television, were provided toys and mirrors, and ample affection around the clock by a gaggle of indulgent animal lovers. They would not get to enjoy the serenity for long, however. When IBR went to court, they argued that the monkeys were their property and demanded that they be sent back to the lab to complete experimentation on. A little over a week later, a judge granted the request and ordered they be returned. But when authorities came to the house to pick up the animals, they were nowhere to be found. Lori told the police she believed some intruder had invaded their home while she was away and stolen the primates. Lieutenant Swain did not accept this story, and the incensed officer arrested her right away. She was released the next day, but police informed PETA that there could be no legal action against Taub without the monkeys as evidence. They reappeared 5 days later in Lori's house with Spanish moss lining their cages, which according to whispers from PETA activists came from a brief Florida vacation. When an irate Taub and his assistants came to the house to collect them, he was met with a locked door that had been barricaded with a couch. They gave the macaques back that day, but wanted to make clear that they were doing so under duress. A few days after the monkeys had returned, two were briefly put in the same cage during a cleaning. They began to fight, and one of them died from the resulting injuries. Following this development, the court ordered NIH to take custody of the now 16 monkeys, which would become their new home during the ensuing court showdown. Taub and his assistant were charged with 17 counts of animal cruelty and failing to provide adequate veterinary care. Their trial was hotly contested, with almost every detail of the case being disputed on both sides. The prosecution contended that Taub's laboratory was unsanitary and posed health risks, but the defendant countered by asserting that his facility was no less clean than any other. The prosecution presented 70 pictures depicting dismal upkeep and injured monkeys, while the defense introduced researchers who had worked in the lab to swear that they never observed such conditions. After days of this tit-for-tat, the court acquitted Taub of 11 of the charges, but found him guilty of 6 counts of animal cruelty. He was fined $3,000, and PETA was elated. With all the negative publicity surrounding the situation, the administrators funding Taub's research turned against him. He became isolated professionally, lost all his grants, and was left with no income or ability to complete his studies. It would take years for Taub to rebuild his reputation, but the dispute over the fate of the monkeys continued past his legal involvement. PETA, fighting to relocate the macaques from the NIH Institute to primarily primates, a sanctuary near San Antonio, sued to gain custody of the animals. NIH's position was that it wanted to complete the experiment, euthanizing the monkeys that had been deafferinated to see if their spinal neurons had been regenerated. The issue was that nobody was around to do it. Taub had no funding, and IBR no longer wanted anything to do with the whole ordeal. All the NIH could do was sit on their hands and wait for some scientists to come along and finish the project. In the meantime, PETA aggressively lobbied Congress to stop this outcome, which proved worthwhile when, in April of 1986, 253 congressional representatives signed a letter charging that the continued confinement of the monkeys was inhumane and a waste of taxpayers' money. Still, the NIH declined to give up their test subjects. PETA resorted to protesting outside their headquarters non-stop for weeks on end. In June, the monkeys were quietly loaded into a truck and driven to the Delta Regional Primate Research Center in Louisiana. Once there, a group of primatologists examined the macaques and determined that the 6 monkeys that hadn't been crippled were healthy and fit to be resocialized, but the rest were suffering from various problems and needed to be put down. They sent the non-impaired primates to the San Diego Zoo, but were hesitant to kill the others off a single panel's recommendation, as they knew that doing so would ignite a political firestorm. They resolved to convene another board of experts to analyze the creatures. Out of the 9 monkeys still at Delta, the new commission recommended the immediate euthanasia of 2 of them, identified 3 as reasonably good candidates for resocialization, and suggested that the remaining 4 be kept in cages until they also reached a point necessitating euthanasia. PETA wasn't happy with this plan, and while their challenge for custody was rejected, they still wanted to extract the monkeys from the NIH's clutches. They sent a friendly team from Moore Park College to analyze the creatures, and they were evaluated to be in much better condition than assessed by the previous appraisals. Because of this, the analysts offered to take in all but 1 of them. The NIH ripped apart their conclusion, calling it inaccurate, incomplete, and otherwise seriously misleading. PETA's ambitions took a turn for the worse when the NIH was approached by a different government branch of health and informed that due to recent advancement in neuroscience, the experimental value of the Silver Spring monkeys had shot up dramatically. A plan was set by the NIH. The experiments would be carried out, but only on the animals that were already so ill that the Delta Research Center had recommended for them to be put down. town. PETA was indignant about the development. They immediately went to court and filed a temporary restraining order prohibiting Delta from euthanizing the monkeys. After 4 months of tireless litigation, Delta informed PETA that one of the macaques, Billy, was suffering a long, painful death and had to be euthanized for his own good. Unconvinced by their plea, Pacheco insisted that Thomas Weiss, the veterinary consultant for primarily primates, inspect Billy. What Thomas found when he arrived at Delta's research center was that Billy was emaciated, had 2 disabled arms, extensive pressure wounds, diaper rashes, bone infections that had spread throughout his entire system, and kidney damage from antibiotic use. Thomas called PETA's lawyer and told her that he agreed with Delta that Billy should be euthanized to spare him from further suffering. 2 hours later, Thomas was informed that PETA would still not allow Delta to put down the suffering animal. Pacheco called him days later to explain his reasoning, but according to Thomas, it was not ethically convincing.
He admitted to me that they felt if they gave in on this animal, they'd lose the whole bunch, and I said, these animals are your power base, and you're no longer basing your decisions on humane considerations. These animals are a pawn.
Eventually, PETA lost all their legal battles, and the remaining monkeys, including Billy, were euthanized. This tale is what put PETA on the map as the largest and most feared animal rights name in America. It's what kicked off their transformation from a small team composed of Newkirk, Pacheco, and some friends into a militant and media-savvy organization with chapters all around the world. And it's what won them their first enemy in Edward Taub, who bitterly condemned them in an interview a decade after their undercover investigation first took place.
We're not dealing with a benign adversary. They're extremely dangerous and extremely malicious, and they'll do anything. And it is minor to them to destroy a person.
PETA has faced controversy for their campaigns that have targeted children. The organization has an entire youth division called PETA 2, that's main focus is reaching young people and instilling in them a compassion for animals. They have their own websites with flash games, videos, quizzes, comics, facts, and other activities to engage the next generation. While this alone would be a rather unobjectionable strategy, where PETA starts to encounter public outrage is when they attempt to traumatize the youth into rejecting their status quo. None of the campaigns we are about to delve into are featured on PETA's Kids website, and it's not hard to see why that's the case. Our next story starts in November of 2003, when PETA encountered a bout of controversy when they published pamphlets called Mommy Kills Animals, and dispersed them in 20 cities across the country to children whose families were exiting performances of the Nutcracker, a high-end show in which many who attend wear fur clothing. The cover displays a mother maniacally preparing to stab a terrified rabbit. On the back of the handout are images of the animals held in captivity to be used for fur, including an especially brutal picture of a skinned mink. The brochure ends with a call to action.
Ask your mommy how many dead animals she killed to make her fur clothes. Then tell her that she paid men to hurt and kill the animals. Everyone knows. And the sooner she stops wearing fur, the sooner the animals will be safe.
While PETA claimed to the press that they were only handing out these to kids aged 13 plus, the diction of the pamphlet is clearly aimed towards younger children. The campaign was roasted for its insensitivity and attempting to drive a wedge between parent and child. After a small uproar, that was seemingly the end of this particular crusade. That was until the sequel dropped 2 years later. In September of 2005, PETA followed up this by distributing another child-oriented leaflet called Daddy Kills Animals, this one with the act of fishing as the target of its ire. The drawing on the cover depicts a father madly gutting a fish with the caption, "Ask Daddy why he's hooked on killing." On the back, the page reads,
Imagine that a man dangles a piece of candy in front of you. You love candy, so you reach for it. But as you grab the candy, a huge metal hook stabs through your hand, and you're ripped off the ground. You fight to get away, but it doesn't do any good. You are caught, and there's nothing you could do about it. You'd feel really scared, wouldn't you? That would be an awful trick to play on someone, wouldn't it? But guess what? Your daddy plays the same wicked trick on fish, and fish get scared too.
The pamphlet ends with a similar final note as its predecessor. "Keep your doggies and kitties away from him, they could be next." This sequel stunt, like the first, received indignation from the public, but this time they had stirred the ire of the meat industry. David Martosco, a representative for the lobbying group Center for Consumer Media, provided their response.
PETA is trying as hard as it can to portray the ordinary angler as a demonic, sadistic, cruel killer. This is what PETA does. It paints caricatures of ordinary people to try to convince the rest of us that we shouldn't want to emulate them. There's gonna be long-term psychological damage from these kids being exposed to the material that PETA puts in front of them on a regular basis.
PETA, for their part, defended their campaign.
They can certainly find stuff that is more in your face on the internet, more in your face on Saturday morning cartoons. We don't need to shelter our kids quite that much.
In 2009, PETA 2 released a Thanksgiving ad featuring a little girl saying grace at the dinner table. Her prayer, however, was a tad more explicit than most.
"Thank you for the turkey we're about to eat, and for the turkey farms where they pack them into dark, tiny little sheds for their whole lives. Thank you for when they burn their feathers off while they're still alive, and for when turkey gets kicked around like a football and killed by people who think it's fun to stomp on their little turkey heads. And special thanks for all the chemicals and dirt and poop that's in the turkey we're about to eat."
When PETA submitted this ad to be played during Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, a show viewed by many children, the decision makers at NBC elected to reject their creative PSA. In 2011 and 2012, PETA responded to the meat-centric holiday with billboards addressing the children of America and Canada. These featured a turkey with a dog's head, and a message that reads, "Kids, if you wouldn't eat your dog, why eat a turkey?" Naturally, this upset a few people. In 2013, PETA stepped up their game of targeting the youth during Thanksgiving with an ad in bus shelters that used lenticular technology to display two different images depending on your viewpoint. For people taller than 4 feet and 2 inches, the iconography was fairly ordinary, with a traditional housewife carving a holiday turkey for her 2 kids. But for toddlers and dwarfs, the image transforms into the mother stabbing a live turkey as blood showers her terrified children. "Traditional Thanksgiving dinner," the ad reads, "from your family butcher." Unsurprisingly, this one received some headlines and complaints. If you look up your personal information on the internet, it's kind of crazy how much of it is out there, which is where Aura comes into play to help. Whether these websites have your full name, legal address, phone number, relatives information, or healthcare plans, Aura will send out requests to any website online that is holding that information and demand that it be taken down. I know a lot of people might scoff off what personal information of theirs is available online, but just look at the headlines. AT&T recently revealed that over 73 million customer records, both existing and former customers, were released on the dark web. In response to this, it was recommended that all those affected use strong passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. Well, the great thing is, Aura does all of this for you plus much more, and you don't have to download a bunch of random apps. It's all in one spot. So if you've been affected by one of the 1,000 data breaches out there, which let's be honest, every single one of you watching has, Aura will help you prevent any damage from being done to your personal identity. I value my privacy, and I think you should as well. So go to aura.com/tgfm or click the link in the description down below to start your 2-week free trial. Another time PETA targeted children was when they took on McDonald's. In 1997, PETA wrote to the company asking for them to take steps to ease the factory-executed suffering of their animals, particularly their chickens. PETA describes the brutality on their website.
Birds are dumped out of their transport crates and hung upside down in metal shackles. Workers often abuse live animals, and eyewitnesses have seen birds' throats cut while they're still conscious, and birds immersed in tanks of scalding hot water while they're still alive and able to feel pain. This cruelty would be illegal if dogs or cats, or even pigs or cows, were the victims.
In 1999, after 2 years of the fast food chain ignoring their demands, PETA launched their McCruelty campaign. Activists from across the country started protesting in front of their restaurants, including disgraced comedian Andy Dick. These protests eventually culminated in the creation of the Unhappy Meal, which they attempted to distribute to young kids entering McDonald's with their families. The chicken sandwich box parody features an image of a menacing Ronald McDonald wielding a bloody knife, as well as pictures of mutilated and disfigured chickens. Inside the box is a fake blood packet, a small paper cutout of the scary clown depicted on the exterior, a bloody plastic chicken, and a McCruelty t-shirt wrapped up to appear like a sandwich. Obviously, parents did not respond well to this campaign. One was quoted as saying, "I don't want my son to be around something like this." In 2009, the fast food giant released a statement responding to PETA's campaign.
McDonald's expects humane treatment of animals by our suppliers in every part of the world where we do business. McDonald's requires our food suppliers to do the right thing for animals, for humans, and for the environment. Our goal has always been to lead the industry by bringing about improvements in animal welfare, including rigorous, ongoing audits of our suppliers' facilities.
In 2015, the activist organization then uploaded a video to their YouTube channel showing the conditions inside chicken suppliers in the United States. And 2 years after that, McDonald's announced that they would be implementing regulations to ensure more humane slaughter methods by the end of 2024. While PETA boldly claimed credit for the victory on their website, the burger chain denies any influence from the advocacy group on their decision. In Virginia, PETA lambasted KFC for their suppliers' treatment of animals with a very similar child-targeted campaign. In March of 2004, PETA announced their Bloody Buckets campaign, in which they handed out their red and white striped containers to children outside KFC restaurants and at schools near the fast food locations. Inside these buckets were bags of fake blood and bones, throat-slit plastic chickens, and cardboard caricatures of blood-spattered Colonel Sanders wielding a butcher knife. On each bucket were labels such as "The Colonel's Secret Recipe," "Live Scalding," "Painful Debeaking," "Crippled Chickens." In response to the stunt, a spokeswoman for KFC told the press,
"We don't comment on the corporate terrorist activities of PETA. They are corporate terrorists. And just like the United States government, we will not negotiate with corporate terrorists."
The next year, PETA activists continued the campaign of traumatizing children across the pond, executing their Bloody Buckets demonstration outside a Dublin school. While all these kid-centric stunts drew attention, none would be more infamous than their skirmishes in the gaming industry. Perhaps the most well-known of PETA's attempts to target children with their campaigns are their online game parodies, with their most famous being a spoof titled Pokemon Black and Blue. In a subversion of the series' typical setup, you play as the pocket monster and engage in battles with humans. The game opens with the text,
"As battling Pokemon grew in popularity, generations of children were growing up believing that Pokemon exist for no other reasons than to be used and abused by humans, until one Pokemon decided he'd had enough."
The player is then treated to their first battle, taking the role of a scuffed-up Pikachu facing off against a maniacal-looking trainer holding a bloody bat. The attacks available to the player include two that were invented by PETA, Protest and Group Hug, while the enemy has his own attacks like Choke Collar, Discipline, and Tail Docking. After winning the battle, the player is able to free the trainer's Tepig and add him to their party. This pattern continues with the player defeating human characters and rescuing their Pokemon, until the trainers see the error of their ways and vow to create an organization called Pokemon Ethically Treated Awesome. 2 years later, PETA released their follow-up, Pokemon Red, White, and Blue. The game starts with the player battling a mysterious stranger who looks suspiciously like the Hamburglar. After being defeated, the stranger says that where he hails from, people eat other beings all the time because they're taught as children that they're the masters of the world. He then exits through a portal back to his home, but the gamer follows him to a McDonald's store. The player then battles through a series of other mascots until they encounter the true menace behind all of this, McDonald's CEO at the time, Jim Skinner. Farming Simulator is a successful video game series, having sold over 25 million copies worldwide and boasting over 90 million mobile downloads. On October 25, 2016, Giant Software put out their new installment, Farming Simulator 17. In this iteration, the game now includes the ability to farm pigs. As you can probably guess, this development bothered PETA enough that they sent a letter to Christian Amon, managing director of the game studio, demanding that real-life video footage of slaughterhouses be included in the game to give players an accurate depiction of the industry. In the letter, they described the conditions they wanted demonstrated.
The slaughterers are in such a hurry that pigs are often only half or insufficiently stunned, wake up while they bleed, and are still alive and conscious while they're plunged into boiling water. If you think that the gruesome nature of pig slaughter would be too upsetting for your audience, we suggest that instead of sugarcoating the subject, Farming 17 should solely simulate crop farming, in which no animals are confined, beaten, or slaughtered, turning Farming 17 into Vegan Farming 17.
PETA published many articles and statements about their request, which drummed up the typical mocking from the internet. They never received any response or acknowledgement from giants. On March 20th, 2020, Nintendo released their 5th entry in the Animal Crossing series, New Horizons. In response to the explosive popularity and critical acclaim of this new installment, PETA decided to release a guide on how to navigate the game as a vegan, instructing readers to avoid fishing, bug catching, digging for clams, catching hermit crabs, and building doghouses. Rather than carry out these unethical activities, PETA outlined which animal-friendly clothing the players may choose for their avatar in order to stay in line with vegan values.
Give your island an animal-friendly name like Veganville. Customize your passport with a phrase like adopt, don't shop, or go vegan. Post a bulletin to instruct your visitors to leave wildlife alone.
The guide concludes with PETA's verdict on Animal Crossing New Horizons.
PETA hopes the game will encourage people to feel closer to the animals we share our planet with, and inspire them to work to #end speciesism.
Perhaps PETA's most indignant battle it waged against a video game was in 2011 when it took on Super Mario 3D Land, a newly released game that featured the fan-favorite Tanuki suit returning, a power-up that allowed Mario to jump up and glide in the air for a period of time. Outraged by this inclusion, PETA made their own game in response called Mario Kills Tanuki, complete with a bloody logo. The Flash game's lore is inscribed directly above it for players to read.
Tanuki may just be a suit in Mario games, but in real life, Tanuki are raccoon dogs who are skinned alive for their fur. By wearing Tanuki, Mario is sending the message that it's okay to wear fur.
The game is a side-scroller in the mold of Mario, although the user plays as the skinned Tanuki, trying to catch a fleeing Mario to take back his stolen pelt. Accompanying the Flash game on the website was a video called Mario Kills Tanuki, which shows truly grotesque real-life footage of raccoons being beaten and skinned alive for their fur. No doubt traumatizing any children who may have stumbled upon the page while searching the web for their favorite plumber. Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag found itself in the crosshairs of PETA as well, when its trailer unveiled the feature of whaling in the game. This move prompted swift condemnation from the organization, arguing that the inclusion glorified cruelty towards animals. After many gaming publications picked up the statement, PETA clarified their criticism, stating,
"This would be a different story if the game portrayed the cruelty and horror experienced when a whale is literally fleeing for her life and then shot with a harpoon. In Assassin's Creed 4, you get ahead by killing. Joe Schmo, who plays this game in his mother's basement, in the safety and comfort of his home, will feel a sense of accomplishment by killing this whale."
Ubisoft responded by defending the game's content given the historical context.
Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag is a work of fiction that depicts the real events during the golden era of pirates. We do not condone illegal whaling, just as we don't condone a pirate lifestyle of poor hygiene.
In spite of PETA's public denouncement, Assassin's Creed 4 went on to become one of the best-selling games of the year, surpassing 11 million copies sold. PETA had less to say about Assassin's Creed 5. In 2008, PETA spoofed the newly released Cooking Mama World Kitchen with their game called Mama Kills Animals. While this did not garner much media attention, it turned out to be a bigger viral hit than many of their other endeavors, although this wouldn't become apparent until years later. Firstly, the game engages the player in a series of minigames, guiding them through the process of preparing the turkey by plucking feathers, removing internal organs, cracking eggs, stuffing the bird, and ultimately cutting off its neck before moving on to several more grisly steps. In between each phase, the game provides gruesome facts about the lives of turkeys before they end up on plates, such as
Turkeys are drugged and bred to grow so quickly that their legs cannot support their weight. Countless birds slowly starve to death within inches of their food after they become crippled and are unable to move.
After cooking the turkey, it's announced that because of the gamer's work, Mama had a change of heart and is now vegan. The player is then guided through the process of making a yummy vegan feast. Years later in 2014, YouTuber Cinnamon Toast Ken would post a video playing through the game. Reading the comments of this upload, which garnered 13 million views, reveals just how many children ended up playing it with no idea of the full context.
I played this game in middle school and completely missed all the messages. I just thought that it was a weird cooking mama game.
I played this game so much as a kid. No idea I was playing PETA propaganda.
While there were whispers back when the game came out that PETA might have stepped into a copyright infringement lawsuit, the original Cooking Mama developers responded to PETA with a fairly playful press release days after the game came out. In the notice, Mama herself speaks in defense of her franchise, pointing out that the newest entry includes over 25 vegetarian-friendly recipes.
I would never put rat in my ratatouille. Like any accomplished cook, I create my recipes to appeal to a broad range of tastes and preferences.
PETA responded with their own letter.
I think you understand that although we made you into a demonic, knife-wielding maniac, we still love you. While we had a good time roasting you, the real purpose of our game, of course, was to bring to light some of the horrific practices of the turkey industry. And we mean the animals who are actually mistreated, not the virtual ones you cook up in your digital kitchen. Even if you don't take the plunge into the wonderful world of vegetarianism yourself, I still hope that you will consider making a vegetarian-only Cooking Mama game.
In 2021, the game was ported over to mobile phones, showing that there was still a sizable enough nostalgic attachment to the violent Cooking Mama parody. And with that, a sizable group of Zoomers grew up with their only knowledge of PETA being through these string of parodies, cementing their place in the 21st century. This was a rare instance of PETA managing to gain some goodwill, even if jokingly, of their target. On February 22, 2019, Google Doodles commemorated the life of legendary conservationist Steve Irwin on his birthday. He was a man beloved by millions of people due to his love of educating the masses about animals, and his life had tragically been cut short in 2006 during a fatal encounter with a stingray. PETA, hot off of making inflammatory remarks about the death of fashion designer Karl Lagerfeld earlier that week, quote-tweeted the Google Doodle tribute with their take on the late crocodile hunter.
Steve Irwin was killed while harassing a ray. He dangled his baby while feeding a crocodile and wrestled wild animals who were minding their own business. Today's Google Doodle sends a dangerous fawning message. Wild animals are entitled to be left alone in their natural habitats.
This response unleashed the wrath of the internet on a level that the animal rights group had rarely ever encountered. Tens of thousands of people came to the defense of the deceased wildlife enthusiast and roasted PETA for their tasteless comment. Influencers like Jacksepticeye, Justin Wang, and Drake Bell chimed in to voice their rage. After it was discovered the PETA account had an automatic function where it would respond to any tweet with the hashtag donate, users started trolling PETA in the replies by including the hashtag in their cutting remarks.
I just ate half a dog. Can I hashtag donate you the rest of it?
Despite the entire internet being against them, PETA stood steadfast in their condemnation of the man. In a statement to USA Today, they dug their hole deeper with their response to the backlash, saying, "People should examine Steve Irwin's record of wildlife molestation." Really, this wasn't surprising, as it was just one of many instances of them going after specific individuals, even if they weren't already in the public eye. On December 16, 1980, KFC founder Colonel Harlan Sanders passed away at the age of 90. He was buried in his iconic white suit and black western string tie in the Louisville Cave Hill Cemetery. 28 years later, PETA discovered this fact. On January 11, 2009, PETA placed a tombstone in the Louisville Cemetery which commemorated the late fast food businessman with a flowery poem.
Kind friend of chickens, today we honor your memory. Our love for you continues. Rest in peace. Those suffering and unable to move remember you, each one striving for salvation. Brother, in us as in you remains dreams for the souls of the voiceless.
But when just reading the bright red capitalized letters running down the left side of the text, the real message is made quite evident. KFC tortures birds. PETA announced their stunt to the world through their website with a post titled, "Colonel Sanders, a Graveyard Companion," saying,
This headstone will remind visitors that KFC stands for cruelty and death. will continue to pressure KFC executives to stop these grotesque abuses of billions of chickens, no matter how long it takes.
While some found this to be relatively harmless in the echelon of PETA stunts, many thought the gag to be disrespectful of the dead. The operators of the Cave Hill Cemetery were especially upset, given that they were tricked into allowing the supposed tribute onto their land. The tombstone was swiftly removed. On March 23, 2012, Kim Kardashian was at a red carpet event in West Hollywood promoting her new fragrance, True Reflection, when a woman walked up to her, yelled, "Lazy fur hag," and emptied a bag of flour on her head. The powdered star was hastily escorted into a private room where the flour was brushed off, after which she returned to the event and picked up where she left off. She later told Entertainment Online,
"That probably is the craziest, unexpected, weird thing that ever happened to me. Like, I said to my makeup artist I wanted more powder, and that's a whole lot of translucent powder right there."
Video of the assault went viral on YouTube, with many in the media praising the socialite for how she handled the situation. The assailant was quickly identified as Christina Cho, an activist and member of PETA. While the organization denied involvement in the planning of the incident, they later came out and said that they would pay Cho's legal fees if she was charged, effectively taking ownership of the act they claimed to have not been sponsoring. Following this revelation, Kim's sister Chloe, who had previously posed in PETA's anti-fur campaigns, announced on her website that she was breaking from the organization.
"I will no longer support PETA. Bullying and harassment is never a solution, and I won't be a part of any organization that thinks otherwise."
Kim ultimately decided not to press charges. Cho was released from police custody, and the story seemingly reached its end. But in January of 2023, with the release of Channel 4's documentary, The Kardashians, A Billion-Dollar Dynasty, new information came to light that reframed the entire story. Kim's former media strategist, Shiraz Hassan, confirmed that the entire stunt was orchestrated by their team to secure headlines to advertise her new perfume. He recollected how he had discussions with Kim regarding the flower bombing in the lead up to the actual performance. According to his words, he said to her,
"We're going to create a media moment. If we create media gold, guess what's going to happen? Everyone's going to be talking about your perfume. Everyone's going to buy it."
If true, then it turns out that this was not a protest by PETA at all, but rather an inside job executed to drum up publicity that the organization happily defended. In 2007, Gordon Ramsay became a fan of horse meat, to the extent that he started to repeatedly encourage his followers to eat more of it, even going so far as to feature a horse meat barbecue in an episode of his cooking show, The F Word. The day before this episode aired, PETA activists responded by showing up to his restaurant in central London, wearing latex horse masks. There, they unloaded 2,000 pounds of horse excrement outside the entrance of the establishment, and wielded signs for photographs that read, "Just say nay, meat stinks, go veg." This would not be the last time PETA lambasted Gordon Ramsay. In 2022, when a viral TikTok Gordon published of himself comically choosing which lamb would be getting slaughtered for his meal caught the attention of the organization, they responded by calling for his children to disavow their dad.
Gordon Ramsay is a callous man who makes a fool of himself. Intimidating gentle lambs is loutish, not amusing. What would be funny is if his children went vegan and disowned him, much in the way Elon Musk's daughter disowned her father. Those lambs are just babies who want little from life but the chance to live it and not end up in this moron's or anyone else's mouth.
This beef isn't entirely one-sided. Ramsay has taken his own shots at the organization, including this viral tweet where he says, "I'm a member of PETA, people eating tasty animals." In August 2019, pop sensation Justin Bieber delighted his followers by revealing his $35,000 acquisition of 2 Savannah kittens, affectionately named Sushi and Tuna. And while Bieber's fans rejoiced over the introduction of his charming exotic pets, PETA was indignant about the Canadian star's decision and took to the press to make their feelings known.
Baby, 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 no! Justin Bieber could inspire his fans around the world to save a life by adopting a cat from a local animal shelter, rather than fueling the dangerous demand for hybrid cats, contributing to the animal overpopulation crisis, and proving that when it comes to helping animals, his stance so far is, "I don't care."
Bieber responded to this call-out the same night with 3 Instagram stories which read,
PETA can suck it. Go focus on the real problems, like poaching and animal brutality. I believe in adopting rescues, but also think there are preferences, and that's what breeders are for. PETA, go help with all the plastic in the ocean and leave my beautiful cats alone.
It was at this point that PETA's founder, Ingrid Newkirk herself, personally published a message responding to Justin.
Sorry, Justin, but you must think more deeply about this issue. When millions of animals are losing their lives every year because not enough people adopt, choosing instead to shop, the animal overpopulation crisis is a real problem.
And with that, the spat reached its conclusion. The last time there's been any update on the controversial felines was in 2021, when Justin rehomed them to their cousins. They chose to do this because the cats were, quote, psycho, which makes sense seeing as they were literally half wild animal. On April 27, 2000, New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani announced to the nation that he had been diagnosed with an early form of prostate cancer. This was met with an outpouring of compassion and empathy from supporters and detractors alike. That is, except for one particular group. You see, a few months later in August, PETA unveiled 2 new ads in Wisconsin, with a milk mustache to Rudy Giuliani and the caption, "Got prostate cancer? Drinking milk contributes to prostate cancer." Naturally, this incited some outrage, with many skewering the organization for capitalizing on a man's serious illness. Giuliani responded to the ad days later.
If they don't pull it, I would strongly consider suing them, because I think what they're doing is outrageous. It would always be tasteless to exploit anyone's illness. I obviously feel it's tasteless and inappropriate to exploit mine.
PETA did not end up having to take down the ad, as the billboard company beat them to the punch. A spokesman for PETA told the press soon after,
In addition to causing all kinds of health problems, it seems that in Wisconsin, dairy products also remove your backbone.
In an interview with CNN, PETA's founder and president was elated with how the campaign turned out. Ingrid boasted that their site attracted 50,000 hits in the week after the ad came up, and that this would have a positive effect on the recognition of animal liberation.
Every single person has learned what veal calves endure in the dairy industry, and that there's no retirement home for cows. I don't regret doing it, but a lot of our members felt that it did hurt Mayor Giuliani. That was not our intention.
Eventually, enough people found the billboard to be a breach of taste that Newkirk herself had to apologize on behalf of the company to the mayor in a public letter.
The effort was not intended as an attack on you, and we're sorry it was taken that way.
Almost 20 years later, in 2018, however, she tweeted about the situation in a less than remorseful fashion.
#throwback to when Rudy Giuliani pushed cow's milk at every news conference in New York, even though it's linked to prostate cancer. PETA caused an uproar by suggesting he not promote dairy for selfish reasons, if nothing else.
The scientific community currently recognizes no linkage between milk and prostate cancer. The study used by PETA to substantiate their claim itself recognizes that the question is far from settled in its own text. But the organization was not done with their public crusade against milk. In 2008, a billboard appeared in New Jersey which read, "Has your child got autism?" Learn more about the link between autism and dairy products at PETA.org, a clear parody of the famous Got Milk ad campaign. This sparked a plethora of complaints from those on the spectrum, concluding with the billboard company ending their agreement with the animal activists. In 2014, this poster resurfaced online, causing PETA to become the subject of widespread mockery on the internet, as well as their 2 cited scientific papers to support their assertion. The first, published in 2002, was criticized for being vague in its analysis and tiny scope, deriving conclusions from a sample size of just 20 children. The second study, published in 1995, had an only slightly larger sample size of 36 kids. In addition, all they found was that antibodies of milk proteins were in the blood of some autistic youths, identifying no link between dairy and autism. But even in light of the criticism, the group stood by the claim, saying,
PETA's website provides parents with a potentially valuable information that researchers have backed up many families' findings that a dairy-free diet can help kids with autism.
This was not their first or last attack on milk based on faulty science, however. Their latest began in 2010, when PETA announced its Got Zits ad campaign. They unveiled their new billboard in Washington state, which showed a teen girl with a milk mustache and numerous blemishes on her face. In 2013, they rebooted the billboard campaign in Kansas City, now with a different girl, and a caption to drive home the point. Studies show milk and cheese trigger acne, ditch dairy. But if this wasn't enough to rile the hatred of both the general onlookers and scientific authorities, PETA still had many fights left to wage based on faulty science. In April of 2015, PETA launched their anti-shearing campaign with a provocative photo starring Australian vegan metal guitarist Jonah Weinhofen, holding a bloodied sheep prop with the caption, "Here's the rest of your wool coat." In an accompanying explanatory video posted on their YouTube channel, Jonah detailed the cruelty of the wool industry, explaining that shearers are paid by volume rather than by the hour, which encourages fast work rather than treating the sheep with care, and often results in sheep having their flesh lopped off. Many called out the campaign for allegedly being dishonest. The story grew large enough that Barnaby Joyce, the Agriculture Minister of Australia, joined in on denouncing the campaign, dismissing Weinhofen as a spiv, living in a vegan wonderland in California. Gabrielle Chan, a sheep farmer with decades of experience, was particularly thorough with her ruthless takedown written for The Guardian.
When they get older, sheep are shorn to remove the wool, usually in one whole fleece. The wool has a price. Wool with scraps of skin attached does not have a price. Even if we were only making an economic argument, PETA's depiction would make no sense. It is true that shearers are paid on volume of sheep, but bear in mind, a scared, hurt animal fights harder and takes longer to shear, so it is not in the interests of the shearer to abuse a sheep.
Unsurprisingly, none of this was sufficient to dissuade PETA from their crusade against shearing, as is evidenced by their article 6 years later, "Sheep Don't Need to Be Sheared, Debunking Wool Myths." While this did little to sway the public to their side, it just served as further evidence of their unshakableness in their crusade. In August of 2011, PETA picked what would perhaps be their most dangerous crusade against established science, urging cat owners to feed their pets meat-free diets. In an official statement, PETA informed the world that
the nutritional needs of dogs and cats can be met with a balanced vegan diet. We see a lot of cats who are vegan and they are thriving, so they don't need meat.
This statement was of course received by many opinions to the alternative. Veterinary experts argued that PETA had entirely ignored the reality that felines are carnivorous and can suffer organ failure and diminished lifespans if deprived of meat. One of the loudest dissenting opinions came from a spokesperson for the Humane Society of the United States, who said, "I hope this is not a trend, or we will be seeing a lot of sick cats." It seems as though in a rare move, PETA realized that this was not a fight they could win, and thus has yet to readdress the issue in the same public and provocative manner. They have also somewhat softened their official stance on the subject, although not by much. Addressing the matter in the frequently asked questions page on their website, PETA writes that while they still believe most dogs and cats can thrive on a vegan diet, some cannot, and so one must be cautious and observant of skin and digestive problems when conducting this transition. The Holocaust on Your Plate campaign was an exhibit set up by PETA in 2003 that consisted of 8 60-square-foot panels that each juxtaposed the factory farming of animals with the infamous mass genocide. One titled "Baby Butchers" shows kids held at a camp side by side with piglets in a crate. And another titled "To Animals, All People Are Nazis" shows concentration camp victims crammed in small spaces side by side with a bunch of chickens in cages. Needless to say, many people were less than pleased with the display. PETA tried to get ahead of the backlash by publishing an open letter on their website, stating that the campaign was inspired by the late Jewish Nobel Prize-winning author Isaac Bashevis Singer, who wrote of animals in relation to them, all people are Nazis. This attempt at appealing to the Jewish community was less than successful in decreasing the rage of advocacy groups. Abraham Foxman, the national director of the Anti-Defamation League and a Holocaust survivor himself, publishing a statement on PETA's offensive spectacle and the proceeding attempt to plead solidarity.
The effort by PETA to compare the deliberate, systematic murder of millions of Jews to the issue of animal rights is abhorrent. PETA's effort to seek approval for their Holocaust on Your Plate campaign is outrageous, offensive, and takes chutzpah to new heights.
The creator behind the exhibit, Matt Prescott, who had family members die in the Holocaust, continued to argue to the media the merits of the display despite rising backlash.
The fact is, all animals feel pain, fear, and loneliness. We're asking people to recognize that what Jews and others went through in the Holocaust Holocaust is what animals go through every day in factory farms.
In 2004, a court in Germany ordered PETA to halt the campaign, and the venture was brought to an end after 20 months. Eventually, in 2005, PETA published an apology written by Ingrid Newkirk herself, which many found to be self-serving and insufficiently apologetic.
We hope those we upset will find it in their hearts to work toward the goal of a kinder world for all, regardless of species.
That same year, PETA decided that juxtaposing historical tragedy with factory farming was such a smash hit with audiences that it was time for another go-around. This time, they would relate animals to the worst horrors visited upon African Americans. Entitled The American Liberation Project, this operation was planned to go across all 50 states, showcasing a similar exhibit as their Holocaust one, this time with several large panels drawing equivalents between two vastly different subjects. One showed a 1930 picture of a lynching of a black man to a cow hanging its feet in an abattoir. Perhaps the most telling of PETA's overall philosophy was a panel showing a black man's chained foot opposite to a shackled leg of a circus elephant. While the first couple city stops elicited mostly groans, when the campaign set up an exhibit in New Haven, Connecticut, things got heated. A man began shouting at the demonstrators that the presentation was racist. The situation quickly escalated into a screaming match, a story which only exacerbated the media's coverage of the effort as a public embarrassment. Black organizations across the country lambasted the initiative, including the NAACP, who said, "They're comparing chickens to black people?" While it took some months for PETA to suspend their Holocaust undertaking due to the near catastrophic confrontation in New Haven, it was only a few weeks after the project's debut that it went on suspension. In a statement, PETA said to the press, "We're not continuing right now while we evaluate. We're reviewing feedback we've received, most of it overwhelmingly positive and some of it quite negative." A month later, the traveling show was back on the road to finish its tour. Not satisfied with only capitalizing on large-scale tragedies, PETA has also attempted to use the gruesome acts of serial killers to their advantage, with their "It's Still Going On" campaign. On August 9th, 1991, only a few days after the arrest of the notorious mass murderer and cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer, they ran an ad in the Des Moines Register that read in blood text,
Milwaukee, July 1991. They were drugged and dragged across the room. Their legs and feet were bound together. Their struggles and cries went unanswered. They were slaughtered and their heads sawn off. Their body parts were refrigerated to be eaten later. Their bones were discarded with the trash. It's still going on.
As if this wasn't bad enough, below the text was imprinted the last zinger in blood. If this leaves a bad taste in your mouth, become a vegetarian. Unsurprisingly, readers were outraged by this, believing that this stunt was done in incredibly poor taste, but PETA was undeterred. In 2002, they attempted to repeat this scheme, this time using the carnage brought upon by Robert Pickton, a Canadian serial killer who admitted to strangling 49 prostitutes in his farm before gutting them to feed his pigs. The ad reads identical to its Dahmer-focused predecessor, only changing the location and other minor details. As expected, this note incited its own outrage from many ordinary people. Canadian papers, for their part, refused to run the advertisement. In response to the backlash, PETA issued a news release saying,
"People who are appalled by Pickton's alleged acts think nothing of sitting down for a dinner featuring the cut-up bits of a tormented animal's body."
This did little to quell the anger of the victims' families, of course. The grandfather of one of Pickton's targets said of the ad, "That is the most disgusting thing I've heard in my whole life." In 2004, after it was reported that some of the meat sold from his farm may have contained the remains of the victims, PETA graduated to using billboards to promote their provocative message of the story. The ad showed a girl on the left and a pig on the right. In the middle was the text, "Neither of us is meat." This one wasn't popular with the victims' families either. One mourning stepmother stated,
"It's absolutely disgusting. I'm so upset. What were these people thinking? Where the hell is their brain? This is so traumatic for all the families. We don't even have a burial certificate or memorial for our daughter. I'd like to see them walk a mile in our shoes, so they will know what it's like for us."
On July 30th, 2008, Canada was shocked by another horror story with the killing of Tim McLean. He was taking the bus home to Winnipeg one evening when a 40-year-old schizophrenic man named Vince Lee boarded the shuttle and sat down next to him. According to witnesses, McLean barely acknowledged Lee, and soon was sleeping with his head against the window, headphones covering his ears. Then, motivated by nothing, Vincent suddenly pulled out a large knife and began stabbing Tim in the neck and chest. A cacophony of screams broke out from the other passengers, causing the bus to pull over so that everyone could flee. Attempts made by the bus driver and 2 other men were made in vain, and all they could do was lock the deranged killer in the bus. Eventually, Lee decapitated McLean and showcased his severed head to those standing outside the bus. He then proceeded to eat several of his victims' organs before finally being immobilized and arrested by officers surrounding the scene. The horrific murder quickly became a top story that shocked and appalled the nation. So naturally, PETA decided it was time to reboot the good old "It's Still Going On" campaign. A week after the heinous killing, PETA announced on their website that they would be running an ad in the Portage Daily Graphic.
Manitoba, an innocent young victim's throat is cut. His struggles and cries are ignored. The man with the knife shows no emotion. The victim is slaughtered and his head cut off. His flesh is eaten. It's still going on.
The ad then offers to provide a free vegetarian starter kit if the reader goes to their website. While the newspaper refused to carry the ad, PETA's attempt was enough to ignite perhaps the largest outrage of the trilogy, with countless media channels covering their exploitation of a tragedy that the country had not nearly finished grieving from. And while these are undoubtedly the most egregious examples of PETA offending large swaths of the population with poor taste ad campaigns, they are far from the only ones. On August 19, 2009, PETA erected a billboard in Jacksonville, Florida depicting a cartoon of an obese woman in a bikini with the caption, "Lose the blubber, go vegetarian." In a press release regarding the billboard, PETA explained their motivation.
Anyone wishing to achieve a hot beach bod is reminded that studies show that vegetarians are, on average, about 10 to 20 pounds lighter than meat eaters. Trying to hide your thunder thighs and balloon belly is no day at the beach.
Many magazines and blogs went on to blast the organization's ad and press release for fat-shaming plus-sized women.
I was planning on taking my family to the beach to enjoy the beautiful day when I saw a billboard that made me want to cry. We all sat there and stared at it for a minute, and everyone in the car was silent. No one wanted to mention my weight. It really had made me so embarrassed, so self-conscious, and so ashamed about my weight that I dropped off my family at the oceanfront and left to go home, making the excuse that I wasn't feeling well.
On August 24th, PETA announced that they had replaced their original display with a new billboard ad that simply read, "Gone," just like all the pounds lost by people who go vegetarian. On September 27th, 2011, Florida man CJ Wickersham was spearfishing with his friends on the beach when he was attacked by a bull shark. The incident required up to 800 stitches, but ended up being a feel-good story when the framing became how his friends banded together to save his life. The positive note was quickly sidetracked when 3 days later, PETA put out an ad mocking CJ for his misfortunes, which read, "Payback is hell," next to an image of a shark devouring a man. CJ's mother responded,
I'm not even going to dignify them with a response. It's not even worth my time. They are over the top. If they don't want to eat meat and fish, good for them. You can do whatever you want, and I'll do what I want.
The ad especially struck a nerve with those in the shark hunting community, like angler Bill Goldschmidt, who told his local news station, "If I see one of those billboards, I will burn it down." Speaking of the campaign, to the Huffington Post, PETA said,
"Sharks are not the most dangerous predators on Earth. We are. Americans alone kill billions of animals for food every year, including fish. And while sharks are natural carnivores, people can choose what they eat."
On October 21st, 2013, PETA announced their Air Angels initiative to record and shame as many hunters as they could by selling surveillance drones on their website. The aim of the campaign was to have a fleet patrolling the skies and capturing evidence of hunters doing cruel or illegal acts. This footage could be live streamed, uploaded to the PETA website, and if damning enough, submitted to game wardens in order to arrest perpetrators. The campaign was announced with a corresponding video demonstrating the capabilities of these drones. As you can imagine, hunters were not a fan of this idea. Many of them left comments on the video threatening to retaliate if surveilled.
Oops, I misfired and took out some drone that was harassing me. Drone hunting at its finest. I don't often get free flying targets.
Commenters on the internet were the least of this initiative's opposition though. Many hunting groups pushed back, and by January of 2014, the program was outlawed in Illinois with a new law banning the use of drones to interfere with hunters or fishermen. PETA disputed the reasoning behind the legislation. As said by their Director of Animal Law, Jared Goodman,
The intention is simply to monitor what hunters are actually doing and whether they're engaged in any illegal activities, such as drinking in possession of a firearm or illegally using spotlights or feed lures. It's being done on public land in a non-residential area. There's no reasonable expectation of privacy there. Any other hunter who's on the same land could see the same thing.
On September 26th, the PETA announced their follow-up to the initial campaign, their Angler Watcher drone program. This new drive was a call to action for any prospective recruits who wanted to field test PETA's new submersible aquatic angle drones to find instances of people fishing in restricted areas, catching protected species, or other illegal and cruel fishing acts. On April 5th, 2023, PETA activists in downtown Charleston set up a demonstration in which they grilled a lifelike baby doll for their Easter Leave Babies Off the Barbecue campaign. The protest wasn't confined to just South Carolina, however, with an identical one concurrently unfolding in Sydney, Australia's Pitt Street Mall. Chickens are just 6 weeks old when eaten, read one of the signs. Needless to say, bystanders were bewildered by the bizarre street performances, and both cases were picked up by local media. A PETA campaign advisor defended the imagery, saying,
PETA is urging anyone who's repulsed by the prospect of chowing down on a newborn to consider that eating any baby, regardless of species, is equally appalling.
Of course, this was not their first time drawing this parallel. In a Thanksgiving ad released nearly 6 years earlier that got far less coverage, PETA used the same evocative imagery of a cooked baby sitting in the middle of a family's dinner table. The commercial ends with text containing the same language as used in the Easter protest signs. The Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show in New York City is one of the oldest and most prestigious dog shows in the world, where purebred canines are evaluated based on how closely they conform to the established breed standards. As can probably be guessed by now, PETA had some objections to the show, including how the animals are handled and the practice of breeding that the business promotes. In 2008, PETA posted an anti-breedism ad to their YouTube channel titled Wrong Meeting.
I'm sorry, sir. I think you have the wrong meeting.
Oh, is this the American Kennel Club?
Yes, but, we're discussing
You believe in the sanctity of pure bloodlines, right?
Yes.
And breeding to achieve a master race?
Well, master pedigree. They're...
Race, pedigree, that's just all semantics.
Later, PETA made the ad real when they actually protested outside the dog show in KKK outfits, with AKC crossed out and KKK written above it. In full white nationalist garb, the activists handed out leaflets which posed the question, the KKK and the AKC, BFF? According to the Associated Press, the response to this street stunt was mass confusion, rather than offense-taking or message-grabbing, with most onlookers puzzled about what was going on and whether or not they were actually really members of America's most infamous extremist group. Every year after, PETA members have continued to protest the dog show, although not dressed as Klansmen. On October 23, 2018, PETA released an article on their website titled "Why Cow's Milk is the Ideal Beverage for Supremacists." In the piece, they asserted that dairy milk has served as a historical symbol adopted by advocates of white supremacy. PETA supported this claim by referencing insight from evolutionary biologists who said that because of genetic mutation among Europeans, white people were more likely to be able to digest lactose. Drinking milk is a brag from white nationalists, says PETA, a self-affirming reminder of their perceived status as the master race. While this may seem like the kind of thing that would generate the organization at least 24 hours of publicity, the write-up was received rather quietly. It wasn't until they tweeted a link to the article later that the internet took notice and started dogpiling PETA.
So, people drinking milk, even black people, are racists? What are you, PETA? Murderers?
Veganism is a white, middle-class, urban white thing.
Chaps, girls, others, there's a couple of religions which deem non-stunned slaughter acceptable. Now I just know you'll be utterly up in arms about this, campaigning relentlessly, remorselessly, without fear or favor, won't you?
Throughout their history, PETA has repeatedly used the objectification of women and overt sexual imagery in their campaigns. One of their most prominent stunts of this variety is the human barbecue. The concept is simple. They set up on the side of the street and have a nude or nearly nude woman pose dead on a grill, often in front of a BBQ restaurant. Critics of the stunt have pointed out that it's never a man performing the role. Regardless, PETA has defended the imagery of the display, arguing,
"Flesh is flesh, and every animal killed by the industrialized meat industry had feelings."
Ironically, the protested restaurants often report to local media increased sales whenever PETA puts on their show. "It's drumming up business," said one man running a barbecue cart near the demonstration. The "I'd rather go naked than wear fur" movement was a celebrity-based campaign that kicked off in 1990 and continued for decades. While there's the odd male celebrity like Steve-O, the majority of those featured have been women, once again inciting accusations of sexism. Nevertheless, it endured and became one of the organization's most notable slogans. On the campaign's 30th year, PETA announced to the world its conclusion with a tweet claiming victory.
"After 3 decades, PETA is retiring our iconic rather go naked than wear fur campaign. It's 2020 and nearly every top designer has ditched fur. We're wrapping up this successful campaign and focusing on an end to the cruel leather and wool industries too."
Every year, starting in late March, Canada holds its annual commercial seal hunt, in which as many as 400,000 of the marine mammals are killed to later be used for fashion or meat. In response, PETA protesters have expressed their disapproval by demonstrating in various states of undress on several occasions. One such instance was in April of 2015, when 6 nearly nude activists painted to portray the flags of the various countries that had banned the selling of seal fur protested outside the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C., ahead of the first day of that year's seal hunt. Each held a sign sending the same message in their depicted country's respective language: "United against Canada's seal slaughter." Another scantily clad protest occurred in April of 2017, on the first day of that year's hunt, when several nude and nearly nude female PETA members gathered at Ottawa's Parliament Hill and poured buckets of fake blood on themselves. The signs on these buckets read, "Commercial seal slaughter bleeds taxes," a reference to the University of Guelph study which found that the annual seal hunt costs Canadian taxpayers $7 million every year. At the next hunt, semi-nude PETA protesters took to the streets of Toronto. On their bodies read the most concise messages they could fit, like "Seal kill bleeds taxes" and "Stop seal pup kill." As they marched and recited chants like "There's no excuse for animal abuse," one of the advocates held up a lit smoke bomb, releasing red fumes in the air to ensure as many eyes and phone cameras were on their performance as possible. The exact impact any of these provocative demonstrations had on the Canadian government's legislation regarding seal hunting remains to be seen. In June of 2012, PETA launched a particularly risque campaign, an adult website called PETA.xxx. The site was designed to have just enough mature content to be deemed pornographic. The introductory text read as follows.
PETA is not new to the world of adult entertainment. In fact, we've been collaborating with some of the most legendary XXX stars for years. Thanks to the availability of .xxx domain names, we can now house all our adult content in one spot. Stick around and take a look at some of PETA's most sizzling ads of all time.
Above this text, the website displayed PSAs starring porn stars, like one from Ron Jeremy that read, "Too much sex can be a bad thing. Help end overpopulation. Spay and neuter your cats and dogs." No actual pornography was on the page, and the site was pulled down only a couple of weeks after it launched. It seems this endeavor was not the smashing marketing success they had planned it to be. PETA's sexual antics aren't just confined to the World Wide Web, however, as they've also created multiple commercials for television. One such ad was Milk Gone Wild, which starts out like a typical Gone Wild type video, only for the women featured to reveal that they have udders for breasts. From their udders, they shoot milk into the mouths of partygoers. The commercial was met with a wide range of negative responses. Unfortunately for PETA, the intended message was equally indecipherable in their sequel ad, Milk Gone Wild 2 at the Car Wash, where women with udders squirt milk onto a car and its eager driver. Unlike their previous attempt, this version ended with 2 minutes of narration over factory farming footage to drive home some kind of point. For 2009 Super Bowl, PETA submitted Veggie Love. An ad in which models seductively play with vegetables as the text reads, "Studies show vegetarians have better sex. Go veg." The ad was rejected by the network and select YouTube commenters.
Honestly, has anyone ever considered going vegetarian after watching this? And how the heck does excluding meat from your diet make sex better? What kind of nonsense research is this?
For 2016's big game, PETA submitted their Last Longer ad, which compared the sex drives of meat eaters and vegans side by side. The ad ends with the message, "Last longer. Go vegan." The spot quickly shot up to be their most viewed YouTube video of all time, only to eventually be taken down by YouTube. Perhaps PETA's most controversial commercial was their Valentine's Day "A Boyfriend Went Vegan" ad in 2012. In it, a pained woman with a neck brace walks on the sidewalk, delicately holding a bag of vegetables.
This is Jessica. She suffers from BWV-AKT boom. Boyfriend went vegan and knocked the bottom out of me. A painful condition that occurs when boyfriends go vegan and can suddenly bring it like a tantric porn star.
The ad then shows her returning to the bedroom, where her boyfriend is painting over a hole in the wall. She throws the bag on him, and we are given a link to a website to learn about how to handle this condition safely. The URL shown actually linked to a real webpage, which featured the introductory text.
For years, women have been open to the physical, emotional, and karmic benefits of veganism. But now, more and more men are discovering the perks of a plant-based diet. More specifically, a dramatic increase in your weighing power and sexual stamina.
Many found the entire campaign to make a mockery of domestic abuse and lambasted PETA for depicting violent sex as gratifying for women. Jezebel.com wrote,
If you weren't already icked out by Valentine's Day, PETA's V-Day ad should do the trick. Because apparently being f***ed into a neck brace is what ladies want out of their dudes.
PETA defended this by arguing,
More than anything, it is a humorous spot and both men and women are getting it. When we put together a campaign, we consider how it will be received. PETA is largely run by women and has a female president, so it's a natural part of the process to consider a woman's viewpoint.
Pamplona, Spain is the host of the world-famous Running of the Bulls event, in which aggressive cattle are let loose in the streets and a crowd of people hurries away from them as they rampage confusedly throughout the city. As you can likely surmise, this is not the favorite function of animal rights believers. In 2002, PETA began their annual Running of the Nudes campaign, in which 25 naked activists holding signs streaked through the streets the bulls would be storming 2 days later. The next year, the number of nude runners grew to 150, and made such a disturbance that they were met with riot police. A year after that, 350 unclothed runners hit the streets, this time wearing underwear so that they would not be shut down by authorities. By 2006, more than 1,000 participated in the stunt. This would be the peak of the protest popularity, as public attention proceeded to wane following it. Because of this, the stunts became more and more explicit as the campaign rediscovered its original purpose. 2008 saw a new approach in protesting, where activists laid naked on the floor, drizzled with fake blood, and having banderillas sticking out of their backs. 2010 and 2011 saw uncovered activists lie on the ground to form the shape of a bleeding bull. In 2016, Pamplona's main square was treated to a massive bloodbath by unclad activists wearing fake bullhorns. A year after that, bare-chested PETA members filled the sky with blood by snapping banderilla props filled with powdered paint. In 2022, PETA subverted their event on its 20th anniversary, with activists wearing dinosaur costumes instead of their usual birthday suits. These running dinosaurs held up signs to explain this visual choice. Bullfighting is prehistoric. And in 2023, dozens of nude activists in red veils and horns demonstrated together to create a sea of blood in the heart of the city. Moving on, one time in 2016, PETA released a PSA in which women speak to the camera detailing a horrible experience.
One man held me down,
while another touched me.
I was so scared.
I didn't know what I had done wrong.
The video ends by revealing that the women weren't talking about their own experiences, but rather that of animals conceived to live on factory farms. Many did not appreciate the relating of sexual assault victims and animals, particularly on Twitter, where the video went viral.
No survivor of sexual assault should have to go through their trauma being compared to an animal's when we've already been dehumanized.
On September 23, 2022, PETA called for a sex strike against all meat-eating men. They described the exact kind of person they were targeting in the post announcing this action.
We all know them. The suburban men with beer bottles in hand, brandishing tongs while cooking sausages on their expensive gas grills. These barbecue masters believe that they can prove their masculinity to themselves and their fellow humans through their consumption of meat.
They went on to cite a statistic that men have a 40% higher carbon footprint because they eat more red meat than women. Even the vegan subreddit was having trouble taking this call to action seriously.
It's always kind of weird and misogynistic when these kind of things come out. So sex is, what, a gift women give to men for their pleasure? It's so weird.
When questioned on the news if this was a serious campaign they were committed to, PETA's representative effectively gave the game away in their attempt at garnering publicity.
Is that a serious idea being put forward that you support?
I mean, we really don't care about your sex life. What we do care about is the planet and the animals we share it with. And those animals are dying by the billions in the crudest ways imaginable.
In September 2008, PETA petitioned Ben & Jerry's to use breast milk instead of cow's milk for their ice cream. Their letter to the frozen treat company reads,
Dairy products have been linked to juvenile diabetes, allergies, constipation, obesity, and prostate and ovarian cancer.
Many sites and publications reported on the bizarre petition, to the point that Ben & Jerry's decided to respond publicly saying, "We applaud PETA's novel approach to bringing attention to an issue, but we believe a mother's milk is best used for her child." While it might sound like an absurd proposition, it wasn't one that originated with PETA. The activist group was inspired by a Swiss restaurant who had announced earlier that year that they were set to open a menu of soup, stews, and sauces made with at least 75% human breast milk. In November of 2018, PETA put up a billboard in San Jose, a city known for having the highest median income for women among all US cities, as well as being home to various tech companies and universities. The advertisement in question read, "Face it, you can't claim to be a feminist and still eat eggs. Eggs and dairy are the product of the abuse of females." This was accompanied by an image of a woman with an egg for a face. When local females were reached for comment, it turns out that they were not impressed by PETA's argument. In a press release, PETA did what they always have done and doubled down on their message.
San Jose is a city of strong women and thoughtful students, which makes it the perfect place to spark a conversation about the blatant misogyny of the egg and dairy industries.
In her 2003 profile with The New Yorker, Ingrid Newkirk revealed something about her post-mortem plans that intrigued and slightly grossed out the world. The following is the exact legal text of her last will and testament expressing what she wants carried out in the event of her death.
While the final decision as to the use of my body remains with PETA, I make the following suggested directions. A. That the meat of my body, or a portion thereof, be used for a human barbecue, to remind the world that the meat of a corpse is all flesh. B. That my skin, or a portion thereof, be removed and made into leather products, such as purses. C. That my feet be removed, and umbrella stands or other ornamentation be made from them, as a reminder of the depravity of killing innocent animals, such as elephants, in order that we might use their body parts for household items and decorations. D. That my eyes be removed, mounted, and delivered to the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, as a reminder that PETA will continue to be watching the agency until it stops poisoning and torturing animals in useless and cruel experiments. E. That my pointing finger be delivered to Kenneth Feld, the owner of the Ringling Brothers, or to a circus museum, to stand as the greatest accusation on earth on behalf of the countless animals who have been deprived of all that is natural and pleasant to them.
On the 20th anniversary of this original publication, Newkirk announced on the PETA website that she had revised her will to be much more elaborate. Some of these new additions included turning her intestines into sausages, and sending them to internet meme celebrity Salt Bae, and sending her rear end to the producers of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, presumably simply because she didn't enjoy the program. Seeing as Newkirk is still alive, it's ultimately unknown if any of these requests will actually be carried out. In April of 2015, PETA published a press release and held a media briefing announcing their support for the highly controversial sheriff Joe Arpaio, after he made his jail the first in the country to have an all-vegetarian menu. The press conference involved Pamela Anderson visiting the jail as a spokeswoman for the organization and taking a tour of the facility alongside Arpaio in front of the press. While Sheriff Joe did this for cost purposes, it made no difference to the elated PETA, who lauded the lawman for making his inmates eat a meatless diet. What PETA didn't reference was the sheriff's controversial history that included racial profiling, mistreating inmates, promoting birtherism, ignoring hundreds of sex crime cases, and abusing power to intimidate his enemies. Those first two examples were practices that were only rectified once courts stepped in to compel him to do so. Even the food itself was not without its controversy. When Fox News visited the factory, their reporter noted that the soy looked like wood chips, and carrots in the stew were dark brown. Arpaio's only response was, "Oh, that's probably just dirt. Don't worry about that." Many publications called out PETA for their hypocrisy on the issue, including Jezebel.com, who wrote,
PETA's love affair with Arpaio is very contradictory to their desire to make the world a better place for everyone. Even Pamela Anderson's statement on the jail, which was all about compassion, seemed completely out of place in the deluge of information about how unkind Arpaio's ways are.
Ingrid Newkirk responded to several of these publications with an email.
That's right. Slam PETA for praising something good that saves animals' lives and is healthier for those incarcerated than the mystery meat usually served to jail inmates. Under your rules, only pure people and pure institutions can be praised for anything, meaning there will be no news even as saints, now long dead, had flies on them.
2 years after this endorsement, Arpaio was convicted of criminal contempt of court. The Animal Liberation Front is a loosely organized eco-terrorist group that advocates for nothing less than the total liberation of animals from captivity. Operating on the principles of direct action and civil disobedience to achieve its goals, the group has sometimes ventured into outright violence, with a history of vandalism, arson, and bombing to carry out their protests. On their website, PETA declares their support for the ALF in no uncertain terms.
Although the ALF and PETA have had very different approaches, we will not condemn it for carrying out illegal actions in which no sentient being is harmed.
In November of 2021, PETA announced that they would be launching a fake clothing line called Urban Outraged, of which all the clothing would be made from human flesh, a clear satirical assault on the leather industry. All of their advertised garments had human names in order to further drive the point home, such as the Avery jacket and Dan pants. All these items had their own detailed shopping pages that included item descriptions, diagrams of which body parts the leather came from, where the person lived, and customer reviews.
Avery's leather is natural and one of a kind. After all, there was only one Avery. The Avery was crafted from the most luxurious skin, making this jacket natural and unique. As Avery was only 22 when she was taken away from her friends and family, the jacket should age beautifully. She came pre-tanned and then was flayed while still alive, so any signs of stress on the skin are incidental and should be taken as signs of individuality.
Finally, there was the website's Afterlife collection page, which presented their personalized turn a loved one into an item service. At the bottom of the page is seemingly a link to download a brochure, but upon clicking it, users would instead be treated to several extreme close-ups of a flayed person, juxtaposed against the face of a gored cow. In the years that followed, PETA would follow up on this project with activists doing TikTok dances in front of Urban Outfitters. When delving into their antics, one thing that PETA loves campaigning for is places to change their name. Instead of going in depth, since this video is long enough, I'd rather just run through the highlights of this trend in succession. PETA asked the Idaho town Caldwell to change the name of the street called Chicken Dinner Road to Chicken Road. Unfortunately for PETA, the street is in rural Canyon County and thus not within Caldwell's jurisdiction, so they said no. Canyon County also would have probably said no had they been asked. PETA offered the New York town of Hamburg $15,000 worth of veggie patties to change their name to Veggieburg. They said no. PETA asked the English town of Nottingham to change their name to Not Eating Ham. They said no. And lastly, PETA started an online campaign to try to get the world to collectively rename fish to sea kittens. The movement was massively successful, and now everyone in the world calls them that. Speaking of changing animal names, on December 4th, 2018, PETA posted a tweet urging people to stop using anti-animal language. Alongside this call to action was a photo providing a list of sayings and their animal-friendly alternatives. These include examples such as replacing "kill two birds with one stone" with "feed two birds with one scone, beat a dead horse with feed a fed horse, and take the bull by the horns with take the flowers by the thorns. PETA added on with a tweet reply saying,
"Just as it became unacceptable to use racist, homophobic, or ableist language, phrases that trivialize cruelty to animals will vanish as more people begin to appreciate animals for who they are and start bringing home the bagels instead of the bacon."
As you may have already guessed, the post went viral and near instantaneously became the subject of widespread mockery.
This tweet was so stupid that I'm about to fry all of this up and eat it. So you're saying there's more than one way to skin a cat. Instead of saying, PETA has killed over 36,000 animals, say, PETA has not euthanized 40,000 animals yet. Instead of saying, PETA steals pets from homes, say, my bad. Did we get that right?
The tweet currently sits at 75,000 retweets, one of PETA's most successful attention grabs on social media to this day. Unfortunately, even with all this publicity, a dark side of their history makes most ignore their efforts. In 2014, the Zarate family was enjoying a peaceful life in a mobile home park located in Norfolk, Virginia. Among the close-knit group was their cherished pet chihuahua, Maya. 3 years prior, the family patriarch purchased the dog as a Christmas gift for their 6-year-old daughter, Cynthia. Though the entire Zarate family adored and cared for Maya, the bond between the canine and the little girl was particularly strong, making them an inseparable duo. However, on October 18th, 2014, Maya vanished seemingly without a trace. That was, at least, until camera footage of the house that day was examined, and a horrible truth was uncovered. In the surveillance footage taken from their porch, a van could be seen backing itself right outside their mobile home. 2 women exited the vehicle, grabbed Maya from the front porch, and fled the scene. The following day, the family traveled to the nearby PETA shelter to reclaim their kidnapped pooch, since it was the most prominent facility of its type in the area. But when they arrived, they were devastated to learn that, in violation of state law, Maya had been euthanized on the very day she was taken from them. To apologize for the incident, a representative from PETA came to their trailer bearing a fruit basket. Naturally, the Zarate family did not find this attempt at reparation to be adequate. After this was brought to authorities, PETA said in a statement that Maya had accidentally been taken as part of a roundup of stray animals in the area that the owner of the mobile home park had asked for. The Chihuahua's killing was called extremely upsetting and a tragic mistake. They were fined $500 by the Commonwealth of Virginia for putting down the dog at their shelter before the legally mandated grace period of 5 days. They paid using donor funds, making the financial penalty a drop in the bucket of the $52 million they had raked in the previous year. Naturally, this caused quite a stir. A Virginia state senator, the county attorney, and various non-profit humane societies all called for an investigation of PETA. The Zarate family, boosted by the attention, were able to lawyer up and file a civil complaint against the animal rights group for $9 million, alleging 3 main counts. In the lawsuit, the family disclosed that the dog's death caused little Cynthia weeks of pain and suffering. The judge allowed the multi-million-dollar case to go forward, although he threw out the claim that PETA intentionally caused emotional distress. PETA celebrated this, telling the press,
"The court's ruling dismissing the major parts of the claims against PETA supports PETA's contention that this is a sham lawsuit based on lies, half-truths, and a lack of legal foundation."
In court, PETA argued that they were absolved of financial responsibility because Maya was objectively worthless. They contended that, at most, Maya's value equated only to the cost of replacing her with another dog. Additionally, they asserted that because they had authorization from the property owner to remove community cats, this negated any trespassing charges for entering and euthanizing the dog. Along those lines, PETA contended that the family was not eligible for punitive damages as their actions did not constitute outrageous behavior. Perhaps most perplexing, PETA's attorney asked the court to look into whether the Spanish-speaking family whose dog they stole and killed were legal citizens of the United States. The Zarate's lawyer argued, on the other hand, that in March of 2017, a sworn statement was submitted to court by a former employee, laying out how PETA lies to obtain animals for euthanization, swipes pets from houses, puts down highly adoptable animals without even trying to rehome them, and uses inhumane methods to euthanize feral cats. In August of 2017, a settlement was finally reached in which PETA would pay the Zarates $49,000, not nearly the amount they sought. Many anti-PETA activists were disappointed by the settlement, as they had hoped the case would bring much-needed exposure to the group's euthanasia practices. Still, according to the statement by the family's attorney, it was a welcome ending for them. Rewinding for a second, in the Zarate family's original complaint back in 2014, the following was alleged.
PETA is technically classified as a charitable organization that purportedly advocates for the humane and ethical treatment of animals. However, the public is generally unaware that under the leadership of its founder and chief executive officer, Ingrid Nurek, PETA detests the concept of domestic animals and pets, and considers pet ownership to be a form of involuntary bondage. Under PETA's philosophy, it is better to kill lost or stray pets than to find them suitable homes. PETA operates a purported animal shelter in Norfolk, Virginia. However, PETA does not use the facility as a true animal shelter. The facility is a front for a slaughterhouse that kills cats and dogs.
Some details in the charge are unambiguously factual. PETA has been based in Norfolk since 1996, and they do operate a shelter within their headquarters. This shelter, like all others in Virginia, is required by the state's Department of Agriculture to submit annual reports detailing the number of cats and dogs they take in, and how many are reclaimed, adopted, transferred, dead from natural causes, euthanized, or remain housed at the end of the year. In 2023, according to Shelter Animal Counts, 8.5% of animals as a whole were euthanized on average across all shelters. So how does PETA compare to the average? Well, in 2023, PETA received 3,136 dogs and cats. Of those, 621 were transferred, 38 were adopted, and 2,471 were killed. Put another way, PETA euthanized 78.8% of the animals that entered their shelter that year. As high as that may seem, this percentage is actually one of PETA's lowest when compared to other years. During the 2010s, PETA euthanized 81% of animals that entered their shelter. For the decade before that, they put down an astonishing 88% of the animals in their care. In a particularly egregious year, PETA euthanized 2,981 dogs and cats in 2006, 97.4% of animals that were brought to them. These statistics are brought up as digs against the organization in countless internet posts. The American Kennel Club and the Virginia Veterinary Medical Association have condemned PETA's high euthanasia rate. That being said, some defenders have argued that these numbers have been presented out of context. What needs to be understood is that PETA operates an open admission animal shelter, otherwise known as a shelter of last resort. While many so-called no-kill facilities boast their low euthanasia rates, they aren't accepting truly sick and agonizing animals, and when they do, they only hold them for a few days before passing them on to a euthanizing shelter. PETA takes in all animals, and rather than let something like a septic cat with a ruptured tumor on its face live out its days in anguish, they put these creatures out of their misery. Now, is every single animal they euthanize at their shelter on death's door? No. PETA is a big supporter of euthanizing feral cats, for instance. The reason for putting these healthy animals to sleep is that they are trying to avoid the avalanche of disasters many no-kill shelters run into, refusing aid to mortally injured animals, warehousing dogs in filthy conditions for extended periods, and neglecting basic care such as providing food and water. Nevertheless, the question of whether or not PETA is justified in killing so many animals in their care will rage on, and given their track record of outrageous stunts, it seems as though this will not bother them since they see any publicity as good publicity.